Please join me in welcoming to the Distinctive Voices podium, Dr. Sam Kriegman.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. I know that the weather outside is treacherous, especially for Los Angeles. I'm in Chicago, so this is nothing. Just wondering why the driver didn't show up for 45 minutes, but okay. So, my name is Sam Kriegman, and I am an assistant professor of many things, but they're all related. You'll just have to trust me. They have to do with AI and robotics and synthetic biology. And I'm here to discuss how we might venture from artificial intelligence, which we all hear a lot about every day in the news, to artificial life, which might be a new term to some of you here. So where better to begin our story than 5 billion years ago at the dawn of our solar system? There were some hydrogen atoms floating in a cloud. They began to compress and fuse, and our sun ignited. A few 100 million years later, other particles came together to form our very own planet. Hundreds of millions of years more, we now have a moon in our sky. It takes 1 billion years to get at very primitive single-celled organisms, prokaryotes. Another 500 million years later, these microorganisms start converting light energy from our sun into their very own chemical energy, and as a byproduct, oxygen. Yet another 1 billion years passes before oxygen begins to build up in our atmosphere. Note how this time scale changes in perspective. Very far towards the dawn of our solar system, units that are very close together represent billions of years, and as it gets towards the front, those start to equal hundreds of millions or 10 million, and we'll zoom in even further. After 2 billion years, evolution finally discovers the building blocks from which you and I are made, eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic from the Greek eukaryon, or good kernel, which refers to the nucleus, inside which is our DNA in bundles of chromosomes. Yet another 1 billion years passes, and we have bacteria and other primitive single-celled proto-animals begin swimming around in the seas. Now, at any point up until now, perhaps there were aliens that visited our planet, but they wouldn't have seen anything or not much to write home about. Sponges and fungi, corals, and more, but it was a still relatively relaxing life for our very distant ancestors. Many of them stayed in one spot, some of them floated around lazily. Then 600 million years ago, someone had the great idea to take a bite out of someone else and thereby steal their energy. And this triggers another explosion, the Cambrian explosion, of different ways of making a living. Legs, teeth, armor, shells, you name it. Complex multicellular fish emerge, some of which eventually venture onto land around 400 or 375 million years ago. And these land lubbers happen to have 4 fins. And so now we're all sitting here, most of us, with 4 limbs. But it could have played out differently. We could all be sitting here with 6 or 8 limbs. So this seems like perhaps a cosmic coincidence, an evolutionary coincidence, not something that's universal that we need to pay attention to, but who knows? We only have one trajectory to guess and look back at. Other creatures, of course, chose to stay in the sea and optimize for that kind of life. In the skies above them, insects started buzzing around. Later, 300 million years ago, enormous reptiles, dinosaurs, walked the earth. Their descendants, birds, invented flight, or so they thought. Little did they know that pterosaurs and insects, as we mentioned, already invented it. And flight would be invented or reinvented yet again later by bats. So this is telling us perhaps something special about flight, that it's not just a coincidence. There's something there. These are the kinds of things we should or might be interested in creating artificial life. And speaking of mammals, There's your great, 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 ... grandma, the Morganocodon. Flowers and bees arrived to make the world a little bit prettier, nicer to be in, although no humans left to write about it. No humans yet are there. So let's zoom in yet again to 10, 5, and 1 million years ago. And remember, this is a wink of an eye in terms of this geological timescale that we've been talking about. So 10 million years ago, primates are climbing and swinging from branch to branch in the forests of Africa. 4 or 5 million years ago, we have Ardipithecus ramidus, who came down from the trees, we think. We can't really tell, we can just analyze the skeleton and guess at this, but that Ardi probably walked very far distances across the land on 2 legs like us. 1 million years ago, our ancestors discovered fire, with which, like all subsequent technologies, one can do immense good and immense bad. It was only 200,000 years ago that our own species, Homo sapiens, appeared, and a mere 10,000 years ago that one of them, in government, of course, decided to invent writing to keep track of what we owed everyone, so you can thank that person. Of course, writing eventually became much more than keeping track of who owes who what. It has become so important to our sense of ourselves that some people have claimed that that's all you need. Language is all you need to understand and to realize intelligence and possibly even sentience. And we see that primarily AI systems today are focusing on language, mathematics, logic, and reasoning. This is a radical claim to say that all you need is language to be intelligent. To call a chatbot like ChatGPT, who's heard of ChatGPT? Everyone's heard of ChatGPT, right? And lots of people call it intelligent. To call a chatbot intelligent is a radical, radical claim. It goes against everything that we know about evolution and biology. Perhaps everything we know is wrong. What do I know? Of course, there are many other engineers that have tried to recreate this much older, this much more foundational sensory motor or athletic intelligence. That's what roboticists do. But thanks to this guy, René Descartes, who cleaved ourselves, our souls, our minds, our intelligence from our material body, this thing doesn't really matter, it's not who you are, according to René, we have for the past 400 years come to view these things of language and logic and rational thought as what really matters for understanding intelligence. But then why did evolution spend so much time on this other stuff? On surviving, eating, coordinating, perceiving, manipulating, communicating. It would be a huge mistake in not just my opinion, but many people's opinions, especially the people that are making these robots, to think that all of that was just thrown away the moment that humans and language entered the scene. That's just not how evolution works, or not how we understand it to work. And there's important consequences of this in the AI systems that people are trying to build out of pure language. A chatbot will never understand what a chair is if it has never taken a seat. It will never understand what cereal is if it cannot eat. It will never understand what it means to grasp this idea I'm talking about if it's never held anything in its hands, or whatever it uses to hold things. At the moment, nothing. So which details of animals, of living intelligences, should we endeavor to recreate in artificial systems? Should it just be language? Should it be something else? It's hard to say. Wouldn't it be nice if we could somehow replay this movie of evolution? I used to say replay the tape of evolution, but now my students at Northwestern don't even know what tapes are and what rewind means, so I've changed it to replay the tape, or replay the movie, rather. They all know that, what that is. Okay. But not just once, not just 100 movies, but many, 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 many trajectories. And maybe some are longer and some are shorter and they branch. And it would be nice if we could do this, if we could see which details of animals are due to accident, to frozen accidents in time, and which hint at universal laws of life and intelligence. Which should we build into our technologies? Perhaps evolution is all you need, if it's fast enough. So what if instead of starting with human intelligence, whatever that is, artificial intelligence evolved by means of artificial life? Well, now we're getting closer to today. 24 years ago, Hod Lipson and Jordan Pollack at Brandeis University did just that. They evolved digital creatures in virtual worlds. Here you can see beams like pistons that are stretching and pushing on a virtual world, not unlike a video game that simulates the laws of physics. And then they 3D printed these robotic life forms with an emerging technology at the time. This took several days of computation, but if you sped up the movie, as Hod Lipson did here, one could, in a sense, watch evolution in action. Could watch evolution unfold before our eyes. I'm hoping to show you what this physical artificial life form looks like once it starts moving. I almost timed up the video perfectly. There it is. See? So that evolved and then was built. It didn't evolve in the real world. It evolved in computers because evolving things in the real world takes a very long time. Computers can help us here, but they're still slow. Now, to get a sense of what we're talking about with this kind of evolutionary algorithm, and I call it good old-fashioned evolution, which is going to give you a hint that I'm going to tell you about a new fancy mode of evolution. It's an elegantly simple algorithm. Here's how it works. We start by generating a random population of creatures in this case. So let's say our population consists of 4 little virtual creatures. We have a green, a pink, a cyan or light blue, and an orange creature. And it's helpful if we define a way to measure how good each design is in the population based off of how it behaves. So let's track how fast these little creatures move into the right-hand side of the screen, as indicated by how long that arrow is. Now, evolution is really beautifully simple, as I mentioned. All we do is delete the bad ones, copy the best one, and create randomly modified copies of the better ones. So you can see I made a slight mutation to that better design. What do you think? Do you think it's going to be faster or slower? Maybe when we evaluate the performance again, we start repeating this algorithm, it will end up being much better than its parent. Or maybe it will be much worse. It's random, we have no idea, maybe it will be somewhere in the middle. It's difficult to know. But if you take something that's a very finely tuned technology like my iPhone, and you randomly change a circuit on its microprocessor, do you think I'm gonna make a better technology than they make at Apple? Probably not. The way that evolution works, because it's forced to work with random mutations, is, or so we think, it makes a lot of very small neutral mutations that don't have much of an effect, but every once in a while it has a small effect, sometimes bad, sometimes good, and the good ones are selected upon. So you have to get lucky. It's a lot of trial and error. But again, if you have billions or millions of years and good building blocks, it's not so much time. But we don't have that much time. So to summarize, there are just 3 core ingredients of Darwinian or neo-Darwinian evolution. That's selection, heredity, and variation. Okay, now you can go evolve your own little creatures. Assuming there's a population with some diversity, random variation alternating with selection yields evolution. But what's the only problem with this? It takes forever. It's fine for us to evolve. It's not fine if we need to quickly evolve a machine to save us from an asteroid that's coming to Earth. That's not the method that I would use to come up with that solution. To understand why evolution is so slow, relative to human timescales, it's helpful to think about the space of all possible animal designs and it as a terrain that biologists call the fitness landscape, in which height on this terrain is fitness, how good a design is, higher is better, and every point along the horizontal axis is a different design, a different animal. The overwhelming majority of every combination of DNA is a dead animal, is a bad design, but of course there are good combinations of DNA, there's good designs. We're all here today. We're pretty good designs. If fitness is measured by locomotion speed, then this turtle is going to be pretty good, but it's still not so great. Perhaps this wolf is better according to our fitness that we defined, but if we define fitness as armor rating, the turtle would be better than the wolf, so it's all relative, but let's stick just with locomotion speed. And there's even better designs than cheetahs and wolves and gazelles. Some may not be possible to evolve or create with organic chemistry. Some may not be possible to evolve with Darwinian evolution. This is what evolution sees. It doesn't see anything. Evolution's blind. It has no foresight of the rocket ships and the cheetahs. It's essentially a hill climbing process, but it's a blind and unconscious process of trial and error and trial and a lot of error. But perhaps we can do a little bit better than that in artificial life. Let's teach evolution a little bit of calculus so that it can see a tiny bit ahead on its hike along the summits of this fitness mountain. Calculus, as you'll recall, right, everyone remembers calculus from high school, is the study of change. So this metaphorical candle that I'm putting here is helping evolution see how changes in the design, moving a little bit to the right or to the left, will change fitness up or down, and by how much. So this three-legged purple creature was evolved from scratch in seconds using such calculus tricks. Here it is flexing in my hand. It's flexing its air muscles. If we chop the robot or creature in half to get a look at its cross-section, you can see what these little air muscles look like. They're little hollow balloons that increase in volume when air is pumped into them through that tube on the top of the robot, on its back. And here's what the robot looks like when it's walking across a tabletop. It's, again, not much to write home about. So is this smarter than ChatGPT? Honestly, I don't know the answer. It can move better. So, okay, this is, perhaps we would call this artificial yet intelligent design. Of course, there's some conceptual baggage there, so I'll simply refer to this as artificial evolution for the remainder of the talk. This work was performed by staff scientist in my lab, David Matthews at Northwestern University. Here's David. And when I say it starts from scratch, I mean that we only give AI some raw materials, the laws of physics, and a way to measure performance, how well the body moves across the land. So starting in this top corner with something that kind of looks like a sponge, there's holes poked in it, and there's muscles in red that are flashing. We're going to evaluate its performance, but thanks to this, remember this candle we lit, we taught evolution calculus, it doesn't have to do trial and error. It can tell how to change the design to make it a tiny bit better. How changes in its design will affect changes in its behavior. And so the next design is not much better, but it is better. It's guaranteed, under some assumptions, to be a little bit better. It shuffles forward. And so this process repeats a few times, not millions of times, not billions of times, just a handful, each time making the design a tiny bit better until we get this about as good as you're going to get with air muscles, with a single muscle that's pumping back and forth. That just took 10 attempts, and it takes about 20 seconds on a phone or a laptop. So it's much better than billions or millions of years, and it's much better than days or weeks of supercomputing. So it's something we're excited about, even if that creature, again, is not something so complex. Now, we built this out of silicone rubber, and here's the evolved or the optimized creature moving on a piece of paper with some cornstarch. It's important to get the ground properties correct to help this guy move forward. So just to give you a sense of why I'm excited about what looks like a balloon animal, we didn't give this process the entire internet of every story ever written, every animal that's ever moved. It starts from a blank slate. It could have generated limbless crawling or rolling or moved like a snake or an earthworm, but instead it discovered legs, which is pretty exciting. And I have no doubt that probably many of you in this audience could design a better air-powered robot, and I certainly know that my soft roboticist colleagues at Northwestern, like Ryan Truby, could design something much, much better than this. But at the very least, what's exciting about this, I think, is that it's going to expand the creativity of engineers. And as the complexity of this design process increases, it's going to become increasingly difficult to simply imagine a solution. So I believe that evolution, or artificial evolution, can be a powerful friend to the imagination. And that's all well and good, but perhaps you're doubting if rubber and air muscles are really the secret to intelligence and what that can really teach us. So is there a better building block than silicone? Well, of course, right? Remember, we were talking about the good kernels, the eukaryotic cells, all built out of the same building block, same as you and I. And they possess seemingly infinite complexity. Here is zooming in on the knee of this primate, you see one cell. Zooming in on the cell, you see all these molecular machines. Its complexity and intelligence, if there ever was intelligence, all the way down. It's really remarkable, and it's the envy of every engineer on Earth. It's like a future technology from thousands of years in the future that's somehow transported back to us. But why not use it? Just to continue this metaphor a little bit further, it's as though we handed Sir Isaac Newton an iPhone, and that would be indistinguishable from magic to Isaac, just as cells are to us today. So why not build novel artificial life forms from existing cells, as evolution has been doing for eons? Okay, well, that's not new either, right? We've been doing this forever. As one of humanity's oldest innovations was learning to shape animals and plants to suit our needs. One of my favorite examples is we've evolved man-eating wolves into man's best friends, humans' best friends. And of course, dogs enrich our lives and they can perform useful work. But it's very unlikely that through artificial selection, they're breeding animals or plants, in this case a wolf, you're going to get anything that you wouldn't call a dog. You're not going to do artificial selection all of a sudden end up with a frog. And it's very difficult to do that. That's because, as I mentioned, most combinations of DNA result in dead animals. It's difficult to get a viable design all the way to something very, very different. Most large mutations break a working design. So from dogs, it's difficult to get anything except dogs. Of course, we continue this process today of shaping nature by genetically modifying all kinds of existing organisms. Once again, the larger the edit, the more likely it's going to be deleterious, a bad mutation that breaks the system. It's unlikely, once again, no matter how good genetic engineering gets, that we're going to be able to edit this amphibian into something else. But I would love to be proved wrong. For the moment, I want to ask how we can go about creating novel organisms. And one way to do that is to borrow existing cells. We're going to borrow cells now from the African clawed frog, Xenopus laevis. Xenopus for strange foot. You can see it has rather strange clawed feet, and laevis means smooth skin. There's another Xenopus tropicalis. But Xenopus laevis is our favorite for today. And the cells we're going to borrow come from eggs, not from adult frogs. I'll talk about that process in a moment. For now, simply imagine that we have a little Lego kit, a building block kit. We have blocks made of skin cells that are passive and provide structural support. And in addition to these passive bricks, we have motors, once again, that expand and contract, or contract and relax, changing in volume, not unlike our air muscles of the other robots. But these ones are a little bit smarter. They had a big start in evolution, big head start. But that's it, that's your Lego kit. Imagine that I gave you as many of these little building blocks as you wanted. What would you build? What could you build? Could you put them together to create a frog that hopped along the ground? What should these kinds of structures look like? It's difficult to say if you want to achieve a certain behavior. Building with biology is very non-intuitive. So once again, we're going to turn to computers and create a computer simulation and an artificial evolutionary design tool that's going to start out, once again, by creating random designs, running a simple evolutionary algorithm, whether or not this is a smart one that knows calculus or not. In the end, if you wait long enough, you get designs that satisfy the objective more or less. These ones move forward. And now, at this point, I hand off the designs to my biologist colleague, Doug Blackiston. He is a developmental biologist at Tufts University and the Wyss Institute at Harvard. And he is going to do something that he taught me how to do, and it's not easy. Doug is not just a brilliant scientist, he's also a kind of athlete. And when Doug was teaching me this, I didn't know, as coming from a computer scientist and a roboticist, that you could not drink a lot of caffeine before you get under a microscope and start to perform surgery on basically a grain of sand. And so my hands were shaking way more than this 1 millimeter little grain of sand, which is a fertilized frog egg. 1 day old, it's a blastula stage. If you're not familiar with that, it's essentially a ball of mush. There's nothing in there. There's no brain cells. It's just a ball of mush, a bunch of stem cells. Doug is taking off certain parts of these cells to get at our Lego bricks. He's just going to remove now this outer shell, this dark tissue. Those white, spherical, sticky stem cells are our building blocks, our eukaryotic cells. Right now, they're not differentiated, but they will turn into the cells we care about, or Doug will force them to. And here's what happens when you have thousands of these cells and you place them in a little dimple in the dish. It's actually not even necessary. The cells really want, quote unquote, to stick together, and it's kind of a combination of physics and biology. They are sticking and healing and minimizing surface area and forming into a sphere of thousands of frog cells, from which we can do some arts and crafts. We can carve by subtraction, or rather Doug is carving with a microcautery device that slightly burns the tissue so it holds its shape. And with very sharp forceps, he is carving out the evolved design, either a design that he made up in his head, like a quadruped, which this one might be, or a design that evolved inside of the computer very fast. Here are 5 such designs that evolved in the computer using simulated frog heart cells in red and simulated frog skin cells in blue. And you can see that there's somewhat of a diversity of designs that are accomplishing this objective. There's some that seem to have legs, others not so much. One's kind of like a pyramid, the other, for some reason, looks like a Cheerio or a donut. What's going on there is that there's simulated water forces, and in the real dish there's also water. So that's one way to reduce drag. One way to move fast through a heavy medium is to become a donut. So artificial evolution taught me that. And here's what happens when we build them out of real frog cells. You can see that the shape matches pretty well to what was evolved in the computer. This is not guaranteed. The cells could have decided not to stick together, not to hold this form that was imposed on them. It's difficult to get living systems to do what you want them to do. In this case, we got them to look how we wanted them to look, or rather how artificial evolution said they should look. And there's skin and heart muscle on the top and bottom of this little creature. It's easier to see if we inject in some RNA molecules that make the skin cells glow green and the heart cells glow red. And okay, here's our evolved creature in simulation on the left, and here's what it looks like when built out of real frog cells on the right. Again, not much. We're starting from the ground up here. It kind of looks like a kernel of popcorn, but thinking about what this is, I think, is helpful to put it in perspective. So this is showing that we can get computer systems, perhaps you might call this AI or artificial evolution, whatever you want to call it is okay with me. But these systems can help us not only design stories and proteins, but they can help us design whole new kinds of living systems. Perhaps you might venture to call this a new organism or not. But this is one design. The space of possible multicellular designs is vast with a capital V, and navigating this space efficiently, I think we could use some help from computers, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. And this is going to give you a sense of the size scale once again. A grain of sand or a poppy seed, and you can see next to George Washington, or his face on a dollar bill, even smaller, how the size scale of these little creatures. These have become known in popular culture as xenobots. Remember, they come from Xenopus laevis cells. They're kind of like robots. They're definitely strange, which is the Greek root, xeno. So I think the name is fitting. The definition is okay. It's not what I would have wrote, but it's great to make up a word and have it appear in a dictionary, or dictionary.com. We're still working on Merriam-Webster, but yeah, so that was a fun process to be a part of. Now, whether xenobots are organisms or robots or simply clumps of frog tissue, they're not very intelligent by today's standards. Now, they're made of very smart materials. They're made of cells. Those cells are constantly acting and sensing and talking to their neighbors chemically, electrically, mechanically. But their overall movement, although that might look intentional to you, is, as far as we can tell, random, or it's fixed. It's a product of their structure. They're like wind-up toys. They're barely even artificial life because they're made out of existing cells, frog tissues, but nevertheless, they're beginning like those very simple proto-animals that we saw billions of years ago. They're beginning to provide a platform for us to realize systems that can self-heal, artificial systems that can move themselves, that are self-powered, in this case, that are extremely small, they're biodegradable. Any one of those adjectives is extremely difficult to realize in electronics and metals and plastics and the ways that we go about building these technologies. Not so with cells. They open the door to all kinds of amazing tools that developmental biologists have built up over the past years. For example, despite the uncontrollability of these designs at the moment, they can still be used as a kind of sensor. So we can inject certain RNA molecules into them so that during the course of their movement, however they may move, if they are exposed to certain stimuli, they will glow a certain color. So the ones that are glowing red here have been exposed to a certain wavelength of light as they were meandering around their dish, and the ones that are green have not experienced that stimuli. We can imagine potentially useful cases in which a fully biodegradable machine that can sense, even if not so smart, could provide a useful purpose. Okay, so who's smarter, xenobots or ChatGPT? I would say neither are intelligent in any meaningful way yet. I would like to end with the humble squirrel, and I think we could do much better to evolve artificial systems that can survive in the wild, not unlike the squirrel. I mean, hell, even a worm would be a good place to start. A machine that, regardless of the surprises that lurk around every turn, can handle those surprises, can survive, can dig and climb and plan and stay alive. Squirrels cannot tell a story. They cannot play Atari. They cannot play chess. But in attempting to build a squirrel, we would learn much more about intelligence than any chatbot or software system alone could ever teach us. Thank you.